This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Closed doors. Closed doors imply that you're not welcome, that perhaps something is being hidden, something might be being protected, or in some cases, they could be hiding a crime. Today, we're going to have a discussion about a crime. As a matter of fact, it's not just one, it's several. And you can count them, each individual crime, and apply a name to it. Because what we're going to talk about today involves the desecration of human remains. And as of this recording, we know of at least 20 in Pueblo, Colorado. Coming to you from the beautiful campus of Jacksonville State University, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I'm going to throw a name out to you real quick, and just imagine a day in this guy's life. This guy's name is Gregory Grayek, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
All right.
Dr. Grayek, if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, forgive me, but I want to give you a tip of the cap right now, because Gregory has a doctorate as a nurse practitioner, which means he's a DNP. And, he's worked as a nurse practitioner for quite some time. I think he'd been a nurse for a while, and then he went back and got his DNP. And, with a DNP, you can be an instructor. You know a lot about medicine. As a matter of fact, you probably know more medicine than most practicing physicians do. Yeah. Because so much of the onus is on all of our nurses out there and everything they have to do. Some of the great unsung heroes in America, as far as I'm concerned. But the reason Gregory's story is so very important is that it blends in with a story we've been seeing pop up in the news now for, I don't know, I guess about a month. And it involves the coroner of Pueblo, Colorado, which is down in the southeastern part of the state. You and I just got back from Colorado.
I just looked it up. Just so you know, I looked it up because I thought, back in the day when there would be like mail order scams,
I know what you're about to
stuffing
say.
Envelopes. It was Pueblo, Colorado. That's where they were based out of. And so I found out where it was looking it up on the map. I'm like, well, we were just in Denver. This is 110 miles to the south, Pueblo, Colorado. There you go.
Let me give you another piece of trivia that I'd heard many years ago about Pueblo, and I didn't know this. It was said at one point in time they had the most federal employees of any city per capita west of the Mississippi River. And I think a lot of federal workers were concentrated there for some reason. I forgive me for those residents in Pueblo that are listening to me. Maybe you can educate me, but it's certainly an interesting environment. And to make it all the more interesting, they've been touched by this problem that seems to be raging in Colorado right now with funeral homes and coroners.
We actually started this a while back when we were talking about another story of that was happening with a funeral home and them selling body parts. And we'll get into that in a minute. But Joe, I don't quite understand why. I don't understand why we're not hearing more of this. And the reason is I looked into it because there's no regulation, Joe. They don't regulate this in Colorado. I'm actually looking over this case and I'm going, what did they charge him with? Because if you don't regulate the industry, people are going to do whatever they can get away with to make as much money as they can. And
they can. That's why we've landed on this gentleman, this nurse practitioner, Gregory. Dave, we're right now, you and I are speaking on Wednesday. Last night, on Tuesday night, the Pueblo County Commissioners actually appointed Dr. Gregory Grayek as as the interim coroner for Pueblo County, Colorado. And
Joe, tell me why they had to do that. Tell me why they had to do that.
Well, it's because the other coroner that they had, who was a funeral home director and had been the coroner for a while, I think, and comes from a family of funeral directors, they arrested him. And they arrested him because of something that they found hidden behind a faux door or faux wall. I've heard a couple of things here. You actually have inspectors, which I find interesting since there is really no oversight,
right?
With coroners. I think that these inspectors were a result of these other cases that we have covered, because I think the people in Colorado finally said, it's probably about time that we get a handle on this situation. Right. So inspectors wind up coming to the funeral home there in Pueblo, where the guy is, he's not just funeral director, he's actually the coroner of Pueblo. And he's apparently begging these inspectors, look, don't go behind that wall. Don't go behind that door. Well, and they could actually smell a foul odor coming from behind the wall, Dave. Now I got to tell you, I don't like funeral homes. I don't like them. I've never liked them. I've spent a lot of time in them. I've done autopsies in funeral homes or assisted with autopsies in funeral homes. I've had to go collect bodies at funeral homes. I've had to go collect cremains. You name it, I've done it. Relative to, I actually had a body that was missing jewelry, and I went out with the police because they'd issued a search warrant at the funeral home because we knew that they had picked up the jewelry along with the body. And it turned out that one of the workers had stolen the jewelry. Oh. And, they were accusing us, the medical examiner's office, for having it. We had signed receipts and all that stuff. So I've been in crematories, over the years for a variety of different reasons. I still take my students at Jacksonville State. I still take them to crematories because I want them to see the process, just so that they understand how all this works. And I don't like going in there. There's just something about it that just puts me, I'm one of those people, it just puts me off for some reason. The sooner I can get out, the better I am. But if you're an inspector with state, first off, you have to know what you're looking at. You cannot, it's like these people, I think, that get these jobs, these governmental favor jobs they get, where they're a building inspector and they have no history in actually contracting or being they've never, nailed two pieces of wood together in their life. If you're going to inspect something relative to the funeral industry, I think you probably got to know something about the funeral industry because you don't know what you're looking at. However, I can tell you this, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to detect decay specifically as it applies to human remains.
Well, you and I have done so many shows together and with others that we've done shows about the smell of human decomposition. We've done it a couple of times this week on different shows, and it's a very distinct smell. And it's distinct because we're not usually around decomposing bodies. You've actually mentioned that the human body, the decomposing body, doesn't smell any different than other animals that are decomposing. That's true, right?
It is true with me.
Yeah.
You'll have a variety of opinions about that. I think many people that say that it smells so distinct. Mm-hmm. Well, it's distinct to you because it might be the first time you smell a decomposing body, or you're not super saturated in it like I am. Maybe I've developed a callus to it, where, decomp smells like decomp smells like decomp. It's kind of like charred remains. Mm-hmm. If I have a human remain that has burned, there are people that say, well, there is a distinctive odor relative to burned human remains. Got to tell you, Dave, and I'm going to be very careful with what I'm about to say. Let's see, how can I do this? Human remains that have been burned, to me, smell no different than any other species that's out there that has been exposed to fire. And that's as far as I'm going to go with it. I'm not going to draw any other kind of comparisons here because it'll really put people off. But for me, I can, when I smell burned flesh, it's burned flesh. Decomp, same way. I think that people want to say that it smells different. Mm-hmm. But for me, whether it's a decomposing deer or a dog, I really don't draw a delineation. And look, I've been locked up in coolers not locked up, but having to work inside of coolers surrounded by decomposing dead. It's part of what you do. So you get kind of a callus built up to it, I think. And kind of a quick aside, there was, and forgive me if I've mentioned this before, but it kind of gives you an insight in the medical legal world. We used to show each other courtesy at the medical examiner's office if we had worked a decomp like one of our colleagues had, and like they had to go to court or they were going to go to lunch, they were going to meet somebody, we would smell each other. And we would literally, and it was very common for us to say to one another, can you come smell me? Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds very odd to somebody that's outside, but you don't know, like when you're going out in public, let's just I'll put it to you this way. If you go out in public and you're wearing like a coroner's badge or a medical examiner jacket or something that identifies you that works for the coroner, and you come walking by and you smell of decomposing flesh, what kind of reflection is that, on your office? Because you'll go out and you'll kind of broadcast this to everybody else that's there. They're thinking that you're not taking due care. I think there's a lot you can learn from that. I think there's a lot you can learn about a person who is a funeral director that takes care of the dead and generationally, dig this, generationally is taking care of the dead. His family had funeral homes all over the Midwest or all over the Great Plains states. I know they mentioned, like Kansas and these other places where his family, it's not that this would be an excuse. It's not like he just dropped out of the ceiling into the funeral industry. It's like he's been around it his entire life. You should know better.
Right.
But when they got through that door, Dave, the inspectors there in Pueblo, when they made their way in with this guy on the outside saying, don't go back there, don't go back there, Dave, they found at least 20 decomposing remains that were in that room. And after they had found them, after they had observed them, this man, who has now been charged, made a startling comment to them that really resonated. And it's actually very similar to even an older case under the same circumstances. So what do you do? What do you do if you own and operate a funeral home and, you have somebody asking you and they're going to ask, why are these dead bodies in here? Why are they not disposed of? Why are they back here in this room? Why haven't you done something with them? Because you have to do something with them. You either cremate them or you bury them. That's really the only two choices in the funeral industry, because this isn't even a matter of trying to, like you're going to, which is another case that we covered, Dave, out of Colorado. Where they were taking off parts of the body and selling them, for medical experimentation.
I want to go back to where you started with this, that you only have two jobs. The main one is taking care of the family and the body that is their loved one. Now, when you've got inspectors that show up, they're not there for fun. We've got a state that is totally lacking in regulation. You don't have to have any kind of anything, it seems. I was trying to find the laws, Joe. And in Colorado, if you don't require a funeral home director having, I don't know, don't you have a top 10 things that are expected? I mean, don't they have a school? Isn't there something?
Licensure?
Isn't there something? And
yeah, I mean, barbers have licenses, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the big thing, who handles licensure, but, and I don't know that it's necessarily about the licensure of a funeral director / mortician as much as it is the regulation of the physical plant, that you're indwelling in. And Dave, this man, that now has, been arrested and has been charged on a variety of things.
And be clear, his name is Brian Cotter. And Brian Cotter owns Davis Mortuary in Pueblo, Colorado, and he was the Pueblo County Colorado Coroner. He was on payroll as the county coroner, Joseph Scott Morgan.
Yeah, an elected official.
Yes. Well,
the service that he provided, I'm going to get to the coroner bit here because, again, this is I don't know. I think that it will really, it'll resonate with particularly our friends out there because of what we talk about relative to representing the dead, Dave. Our advocacy, if you will, for the dead. Cotter also provided crematory, okay, which means that you could go to him and you could either do a standard burial, where they're going to do the embalming, they're going to sell you the casket, maybe you already have a plot, they're going to, drop the crypt in the ground, which you see these things going down the road all the time on flatbeds. It looks like a big concrete box. They drop that in the ground, then they put the coffin / casket in there and then put the cap on it and pour the dirt, or you cremate. Well, the big reveal with him is that they're asking him about these bodies back in the room, Dave. And he says, well, I may have given some families ashes that weren't really their loved ones. What? Yeah. So you're not cremating the bodies. What you're doing is you're going out and I don't know, maybe you're getting bits of burned wood, cloth, gravel, anything else, and putting it into an urn.
Fake ashes.
This family that has trusted you with the most precious thing that they have, dude, with a loved one, and you're leaving them to rot in the back room, and you're giving us, and look, if you have a family member that has cremains in their home, or maybe a friend, you go there, and it's generally placed in a place of honor, maybe on a mantelpiece or somewhere, and it's there to be seen and remembered, I think, by most families. Can you imagine finding out, Dave, that you don't have your grandma's remains, you have a bunch of old burned up sticks or charcoal or something like that somebody has essentially given you back into hermetically sealed, urn that they probably charged you too much money for in the first place. And you've got this thing displayed on your mantelpiece there. And then all of a sudden can you imagine how gutting that would be if that was your loved one up there and you find this out? And this is what these families are finding out about this guy. They just assumed that they had their loved ones' remains, and they didn't. They were rotting back in this room, Dave.
Well, the thing that gets me, Joe, is I'm back to, this is the county coroner. He's a person in a trusted position.
Oh, boy.
He sought that position out, and he's the owner of this Davis Mortuary in Pueblo, Colorado. So you've got a person who is dedicated, and you mentioned before, this is a family business, something that was part of his life generationally. And I would expect that somebody in this position, not just would know better. We all know better. There's not one person right this minute that thinks for a second you can open up a building, call it a mortuary, and take people's money, go dig up dirt, put it in a box, and stack the bodies in the back.
Yeah.
The fact that the inspectors showed up means they were thinking there was a problem, Joe. Somewhere, somebody said something's not right. Now, I don't know who it was, but he only had 20 bodies. They're only talking 20. That's not a lot, not compared to another story we have. So you got 20, but they stink, and they're back here.
Well, let me tell you what else this draws into question, Dave, because I wanted to return back to this. You mentioned coroner. Okay, if you have those things that are seen and unseen, right? And so those things that are seen relative to this violation of law, and where you're deceiving people, you're lying to people, this sort of thing. And this is out. The sunlight has been blasted onto the situation. What about all the other things that may be unseen? Because if you're in a position where you're the coroner, Dave, there is a title that is given to the coroner from county to county. You know what that title is? It's actually the official certifier of death. And so if you're the certifier of death, that means that you are given special authority under the law to go out and perform examinations or appoint someone to do examinations like, pathologists and other physicians that can do, autopsies on cases. You're actually making determinations about manner and cause of death, Dave. You're signing death certificates. How do I know that you can be trusted with those circumstances when so much rests upon your conclusions as the principal death investigator in a county where families are sitting back, and let's say you've got a case that might be undetermined. The family thinks that it's accident, and you are trying to weigh this out in your brain. You're trying to apply maybe a scientific methodology to this to understand what the forensic pathologist is telling you from the autopsy room, and you fail in that duty. Well, now you might have a family that's going without money because insurance didn't pay out. Can you be trusted in these bigger things? I think that's what for me at least, that's one of the things that comes down to. Also, you just think about, the coroner is on the tip of the spear when it comes to public health, because they're the first person that can recognize patterns if you have some kind of disease outbreak or anything that's going on in a community. Maybe you see, maybe because you're the first person at the scene, you're suddenly seeing an uptick in the numbers of deaths that are related to fentanyl. But yet you're not on top of it. You're distracted, or you're doing something else, or you've decided that it's not as important because you're the primary investigator of deaths, all deaths. It's not just homicides. It's all deaths. That's how broad this is. And unfortunately, it spreads out from there. It impacts everybody. And this idea of, you're kind of sitting out there, death is a very personal one-on-one kind of thing. When families have a death, not everybody in the community is aware of it. You're suffering in silence, what do they say about the British way? You do things in silence. And you're there alone with death. Now, if you're there alone with death, the one person you're going to two people you're going to have contact with is going to be the coroner, and you're going to be the funeral director. This guy's wearing both hats in this community. So I hope that I'm laying this out accurately. It's just the consequences of these actions are so far reaching. I would imagine, Dave, that simply based upon this bit, the state attorney general and probably certainly the DA for Pueblo County has got to be looking into cases that he has handled as the coroner, Dave.
Gonna have to. And
you have to, man.
You've put that in such a way, Joe, that I didn't consider. I was looking at this merely from, level one. why are you stashing bodies in the back when your job is to get rid of, to bury them or cremate them? That's your job, and you chose to not do your job. You took money and did not do your job. That's one thing. Some of us are feeling different about the dead than others. I get that. For some families, this would be something that you would never be able to make amends. Others, they're going to be less severe. But let's go with the extreme. Let's go with those that you're not going to, there's nothing you can say or do to change what you have done. There is nothing. This is that bad. And I'm thinking somebody in this profession, you've got at least 20 bodies, 20 dead bodies. Yeah. And the best you could think to do was to keep them in a back room where anybody coming into your building is going to smell it. And again, now back to my original question with you about the odor, the smell of human decomposition. Well, the reason people say it's something you'll never forget is because the average person is not around decomposition.
Right.
We're not around dogs, cats. We have it. We take care of it. We get rid of it. You know, we don't have a dead animal around us for any length of time because of the odor. We get rid of them. Where when you deal with a dead body, as you do, where you're having to examine and spend time with it, that's a different scenario. Now you're talking to somebody here that actually, rather than do the job he was paid to do, he stashed them and knew it was wrong. It's not like there was a slip of consciousness that he has some mental issue going on. He knew it was wrong. He tried to hide it. He disguised it behind a fake wall, fake door, whatever it was. By the way, it was made out of cardboard.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing
that was the case. Yeah.
It's a cardboard something, which if you're trying to cover up something, that's not happening. If my dog was in there, you'd smell it. But that's why I think this is so frustrating, Joe, is those of us, we have so little control in our life that when our loved one dies, we feel like we owe it to them to preserve their memory. And this is the only way we can, is what we do. They're no longer here to defend themselves. They can't fix this. It's our job. Whether, it's our loved one. And it's my job to take care of my loved one. And I invested my heart in this, and you dropped the ball, man. But beyond that, you took money. Yeah. You took money and you stashed Granny in the back and took the family's last money. They had to have a yard sale to pay you to cremate the body. And you didn't. You gave them some rocks, and her body is still here. I mean, Joe, that goes about as bad as it gets.
It does go really bad really quickly. And I got to tell you, Dave, in my opinion, because this is a fraud case, and we're going to get into another case that's very similar to this, but this is a fraud case. And I would think that on at least some level, the feds would probably have an interest in this. If there's any kind of wire fraud involved in this or anything like this, you could be looking at federal time. And it was only, I guess it was a year ago, Dave, that I think it was, what's it called? The Sunshine. I can't remember the Sunshine funeral mortuary place in Colorado.
Yeah.
And this woman I know in that particular case went up on federal charges based upon what she had been doing with remains. Yeah,
Megan
here
Hess.
it is.
It was Megan Hess and Shirley Koch. Yep. Those are the two defrauded family members, dismembered bodies, and then sold them illegally, the body parts. I remember when you brought that to me, I'm like, come on, man, this is like
this can't be real. Yeah,
I really did think. I thought, you know what, they're fake news sites and they look real. And I thought, come on, there's a legitimate answer for this, and there wasn't. Just like there is not a legitimate answer for the county coroner owning a funeral home and stacking bodies in the back or stashing them. We don't know exactly how he kept the bodies, do we?
No, we don't. And here's another piece to this. I'm not saying that embalmed bodies, let's see, how can I phrase this? I'm not saying that embalmed bodies don't decay and don't stink. They do. Okay. You're merely slowing down the inevitable. Okay. It's gonna, from dust we came, from dust we will return. I don't care how many chemicals you have in your body. Now I've done exhumations on bodies where I remember one case in particular, we pulled a guy out of the ground that had been in there for 16 years, and except for a little mold on his face, he looked pristine, absolutely pristine, didn't have a foul odor about him or anything. My question is this: it's kind of a baseline thing that if you're storing bodies in a non-refrigerated area, you would at least think that they would be embalmed and preserved. My question is, not only are you not cremating the bodies, are you telling me that you didn't spend however many bucks it was on the embalming fluid that it would take to embalm these bodies and preserve them? Because what we're hearing, Dave, is that the smell almost knocked them down. When they get in there, they're smelling the smell. So are you telling me that you actually had non-preserved human remains in this environment? They haven't been embalmed? It's just a question I'm just asking. I think it's a legitimate question. Did you not embalm the body? That's like funeral director 101. I'm not talking about lighting the fire in the crematory or, doing all the stuff you have to do. I'm merely talking about going to the embalming room and setting things up in order to start the perfusion of the body. You didn't do that? I'm trying to understand here, because it just doesn't make sense. But in this world of the dead, there's a lot of things that we don't understand. Just like maybe a funeral director in one location in the state of Colorado who actually dismembers bodies and sells those parts for medical experiments. Or maybe a case from back in 2002 in the state of Georgia where it wasn't 20 bodies. It was 300. Dave, had a friend of mine that was a forensic anthropologist, and this individual worked with me in Atlanta at the ME's office, and for a time they were the state forensic anthropologist for Georgia, and he told me a story that, first off, it chilled me, but it also broke my heart. Now, I want to relate this to you right now. The year was 2002. A lot of stuff going on in the news back then, remember? The world was changing rapidly. And this case pops up in Lafayette, Georgia, not Louisiana, but Lafayette, Georgia. People in Georgia call it Lafayette, but it's Lafayette. I'm from Louisiana, so I'll call it Lafayette. There was a report that bodies had been found. Now, anytime, I hear a news report and it says that bodies been found, you got my interest. All right. I want to know, when you're saying bodies, body will catch my attention. You start saying plural, and then all of a sudden the numbers start trickling out. Well, this friend of mine had told me he had been summoned up there to this location, and it was on private property. A house had a small 1960s, mid-60s brick ranch house on it with a pond in the front. Nothing pretentious or over the top. And then there was these buildings out back of it. Big piece of property surrounded by pine forest. And they were finding stacks and stacks and stacks of human remains in various stages of decay. My friend said that he was walking along with two state law enforcement agents abreast through the woods. And they look just ahead of them, and there's a piece of plywood laying on the pine needle floor beneath. I think these were like pulpwood pines, where they're planted in rows and they'd reached some level of maturity. there was a piece of plywood, and he said he saw what appeared to be a baby doll. And as they approached, it was not a baby doll. It was a baby, and still had the little ID bracelet around the ankle that are placed on newborns. Still had a little diaper on the body. And this baby had been placed out there. It turned out that it was these remains were one of the 300 plus perhaps remains that were allegedly being taken care of by Ray Brent Marsh, who ran Tri-State Crematory in Georgia. And Tri-State, it's Tri-State because it approximates Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. It's right at the confluence of those three states up there. So they had business, and this is important to understand. This guy did business with funeral homes from the tri-state area. The reason he did business with these funeral homes is because not every funeral home has a crematory. It's a big deal to have a crematory. It's a lot of work. All right. There's all these certifications you have to go through and so forth and so on. The maintenance is out of this world. Well, he had a crematory, and so what he would do, he worked as, I guess you'd call it, a subcontractor. He would be paid by the funeral home. That was part of the cost. They would bring the body to him. He would embalm the bodies, send them out with an urn, and they would go forth. Well, for a number of reasons, apparently his crematory no longer worked. There was even evidence, Dave, that he had attempted to hook the crematory up to propane gas tanks to make it work. And of course, as you well know, propane don't burn nothing like natural gas. All right. And to operate a crematory, it is a constant job, and you have to have sufficient fuel. And it's generally natural gas that you're going to have because you're going to have to get temps up to about 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit in order to render down human remain. And he didn't have it. He just didn't have it. But what he did have were, do you remember how I mentioned just a second ago about the concrete crypts that you see going down the road? They're like concrete boxes. If you ever see these things on the back of a flatbed truck, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And they go out to grave sites, and they lower these things into the ground, and the body within that's casketed goes into that container, and then a lid is put on the top of it. Well, Brother Dave, he had multiple of these things out at the site. And what he would do is he would take bodies that he would be contracted to cremate. He'd pick them up from funeral homes. They'd be brought to him, and he would take them and layer them inside of these crypts, just throwing them on top of one another. You had bodies laying around on the ground. There were remains. I remember talking to people at the time. They said that they really couldn't take the full measure of what they were seeing, because unlike this recent case in Colorado, these are 300 bodies, Dave. 300. There are Civil War battles, skirmishes that didn't result in 300 deaths. Right. So you've got 300 bodies laying all about this property. What and I'm actually just kind of speaking out loud here, because I don't know how. I didn't go to the scene there in that particular case. I had friends up there, but it's like, how does your brain even begin to absorb this, to kind of take it in, what you're seeing?
Just think about it for just a minute, Joe. You've got 300 bodies. That means 300 people have paid to have that body cremated. Yeah. They've paid the full rate that you charge. It's not like you didn't get paid, so you didn't do the job. He got the money to do the job. And as you mentioned, he tried to operate it with propane, and just goes to show you we're not dealing with the mental giant here. It's not like your back barbecue, that you can just work it with something else. But the bottom line here, he was paid 300 times or more. And rather than do the job that he swore to do and promised his communities, plural, he opted to steal the money. I mean, it's no different than if I just put on a suit and coat and tell everybody Dave's crematoria is open. Give me your money. I'll put it right here. and I'll take care of your loved one. I'll go out in the back, scoop up some sand, and here. I mean, that's just beyond anything I can even. I just, for the love, cannot understand some people. And
I can't either.
The fact that he's not the only, that's not even, okay, 300 in Georgia. We got another one in Colorado that's 190. He's stacking them up in an old building.
This is within the last two years.
Yes.
There's even another one that I know that I think that people probably remember this kind of burst on the scene where we had, there was a guy's, let me see, how can I explain this? This is in Colorado. We've got a fellow who had abandoned, the funeral home had been closed down for a while. He has a residence just in the Denver area where they find a hearse, Dave. Now dig this. They find a hearse there. There is a woman's body inside the hearse. And deposited throughout this guy's house are boxes of cremains that were never turned over to families. And he's literally got them in the crawl spaces. You know, and look, I know that life can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, but you look at the choices that individuals make when it comes to the care of the deceased. And not simply the care of the deceased. You know, you'd mentioned, we were talking about, well, let's just take the guy back with the 20, the top of the show.
Yeah.
All right. Cotter.
Yeah. Brian Cotter, Davis Mortuary, Pueblo, Colorado.
Pueblo, Colorado. They used to do the zip code after that too.
I know.
But
I was trying to
anyway, just think about the one family member that is exchanging funds. That one family member has probably got multiple other family members that are related to the deceased. So the impact of this thing is not merely the one person that has paid the money. You're talking about something that is so scarring to a family that when Thanksgiving rolls around, Christmas rolls around, and you're sitting around the table and you're staring at each other, there will be this abiding sadness that will inhabit your soul forever because you remember that loved one sitting at the table, breaking bread with you, and you're blaming yourself because you chose this person to help you when you were the weakest. And they failed not just as a coroner, not just as a funeral director, but I submit to you that they failed as a fellow human being. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.